Hello, this is Ashley. Welcome back to week 3 of our summer AI series, talking about the report that we just released on guidance for the use of AI in the K-12 classroom. As a reminder, this report has 4 pillars of ways that instructors can use AI in their classroom. And in our first episode, we talked in general about the report and ways you can use it. And then we talked about pillar 1, which was on creating cognitively demanding tasks for students to use in class. So this week, we're going to talk about pillar 2, which is going to be all about how teachers can use AI to kind of get rid of some of your administrative work and maybe help reduce some of the planning time. And as a reminder, you can get this report for free. You don't even have to sign up for anything. You don't have to give us your email address. It's just for you to use and to make life easier for you. And these episodes are designed to hopefully either be used as a guide as you're using the report, or even if you don't use the report itself, you can listen to these episodes and get a lot of useful tips on how to start using AI in your classroom to make life easier for you and for your students. All right. So with that, I'm going to send us over to my interview with Leslie. Hi, Leslie. How are you?
Hey, Ashley, how are you?
I am all right. I am looking forward to this episode a lot. This one, I think last week you said that even though they're all equally important pillars, that the first pillar was probably your favorite because
It probably is my favorite.
Standing back and you're a project-based learning person. I think of the pillars, this one's my favorite, and I feel like it's going to be the favorite of a lot of the teachers listening, especially if they are scared of AI currently, because this week we get to talk about ways that AI can make life easier for teachers by streamlining their work. So,
Yes. Yeah,
can we get started by tell us more about this pillar?
sure. I mean, really, I feel like this is one of the more straightforward ones. You want to get more stuff done? Use AI thoughtfully. Don't just dive in. But yes, so this pillar is about helping teachers with all the other work that we are required to do to maintain communication with parents, students, to lesson plan thoughtfully, resource creation, write learning goals, like all the stuff. I feel like the job of the teacher, we keep building expectations for teachers, but we don't take anything away, or we don't provide them something to help them with that. And so this pillar is seeing that there's a power to helping teachers do their jobs better and with more productivity. I'm sure there's a better word there.
So I think this is going to be a really fun episode. I think it's going to have a lot of great ideas in it, but I do want to address kind of an elephant in the room, a big pitfall that I see, and I want to get it out of the way and talk about the bad first. So here's something I always think about. Where's the line between I'm in my classroom and I'm telling students, you can't use AI to just write your paper for you. All right. But then maybe I go and I get AI to write my lesson plan for me. There's a problem there, right? Like, where is the balance between what I expect of my students and what they expect of me?
Well, I mean, I would say do what you expect of your students. So if the goal of a lesson plan is to thoughtfully plan the learning experience for your students, you can't just get that from one shot on AI, or I would highly suspect that you can't get that from one shot. Now, if your goal is to complete a lesson plan, to do a checkoff point so that your administrator sees that you have a lesson plan, but then you throw that lesson plan out the door and do whatever you're going to do anyways, right? Then maybe you're using AI to do a checklist. You're doing exactly what you don't want your kids to do.
Right.
So I would say go in with the intention. What is your intention of how you want to use AI with a lesson plan? And what is it that you need to do to take those thoughts and ideas to make them real for you and for your classroom?
And I think something there that I kind of heard is if you're going to be using AI correctly, in your lesson planning and your whatever you're doing, your grading, whatever you use it for, then I think it's safe to say you should also allow your students to correctly use it.
Yes.
So I think it's just as problematic to be like, okay, I'm using AI correctly, but I don't trust my students to, so they're not allowed to use it at all. That's problematic too. But yeah, if they're allowed to use it correctly, then I should be allowed to use it correctly.
Right. But I would start with you starting to learn how to use it correctly. And what are the processes and procedures that you go through to make sure that you're using it thoughtfully? I wouldn't say correctly, I would say more thoughtfully. And then apply that to your students. What would that look like for your students to do that in the context of your class or your pathway?
I agree with you. Correctly is not the right word. I meant it to be thoughtfully. I meant it to be, I'm not just having AI do all the work for me. I am using it as a tool, as we talked about in one of the episodes, not as the builder itself. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about what are those thoughtful things I need to be doing? What are the steps I should be taking to be able to have AI help me make my life easier as a teacher, but also to do it thoughtfully and to do it in a way that I'm not just outsourcing work that maybe I should be doing myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but if you're using it for planning, go back to the standards. Be very mindful of what do you want kids to learn? What is it going to look like for them to show you that they've learned that, and then backwards plan from that. AI is just a thought partner. It's a tool to get you there. For all the other ways that AI can support your classroom, another key thing that we talked about, I think in the last session or the session before, is being very mindful of what data you put into an AI system. So do not put students' names, parents' names, any personal identifiable information into a system. You always want to, especially if you're dealing with students or trying to craft letters with parents, you want to use things like, I need to write a letter to a parent that concerning information or something they did in the classroom, such as, you could fill that in, right, what they did. Help me to craft a letter that sounds calm. I really don't know if that's a good prompt, but like you're wanting to tell it, thinking about a Daniel Spicy acronym that you mentioned in a previous podcast. If you want to be specific, you want to give it the parameters that needs to happen. What do you want it to sound like? But just leave out names, leave out identifiable numbers. That still needs to be broad. And I would also say, like anything, remember that while AI's reach is broader than what we can reach in a few minutes, it may not be giving you the best information for the situation. So always layer everything with your personal expertise. Teachers, y'all are wonderful. You're thoughtful. You're experts in your content area. You're experts in your students. You're experts in pedagogy. Remember that, sink into that, and be mindful of the information that you're getting from AI, and always layer it with your personal expertise and voice.
And I want to kind of go to something that you just said about the data, because I think a lot of teachers are going to know, I'm not going to go put the social security number and all the details of my students. But what you may not think about all the time is that AI collects all the things that you said. So over time, you might be giving it more information than you realize. And so you have to be careful that way too, because maybe this week I say something to, I'm in small town Virginia, and now it knows my location, right? It knows I'm in small town Virginia. And then next week I'm like, oh, I have a student named Susie. Susie's not a common name, so they're not going to, who cares if I say Susie? But now they know Susie in small Virginia, and maybe there's only one Susie in small town Virginia. And so it can add up to personal information without you meaning it to. So you got to be very careful about all the information that you put in so that it doesn't allow a student to be identified. So even if you think, like I said, Susie is a common name, maybe not for young people today. Like, whatever it is, whatever's the popular name of the day. When I was a kid,
Ashley was the most popular name, so it would have been Ashley. Well, who cares if you put Ashley in, because that's such a common name, and not putting the last name, I'm not putting her grades in, but you put enough of those little details that it adds up to there's just one it could be about.
Yes, yeah. And we really just don't know how AI is using that or is going to use that, or the people really what data gets stored, collected, and possibly sold to third parties. And we just have to be very cautious of that.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been talking kind of in theoretical terms here. Let's get a little bit more specific. What are some real world examples or real world tasks that teachers could get help with AI to do?
Sure. Well, we talked about lesson planning, so I don't want to beat that horse to death. I do think so. There are systems now out there. I do feel like they're still maybe in their infancy, but for getting feedback, like writing feedback on student work and grading student work, there are ways to enhance your current assignments. That's probably similar to lesson planning. There are tools that can be there to help create worksheets, graphic organizers, things really quickly. One of my favorites that I have been playing around with is Diffit, Diffit. And you can put in a text and get out like a labeled text and supporting graphic organizers for that. So you can use tools to help create like the resources, the things that help make the learning come alive or to support students in that process. A lot of my teachers are also using it to help for their English language learners, especially ones that are just starting to learn the English language while they're also having to learn math or science or construction. They are using it to interpret things into a language or to talk with students through something like Google Translate. And I will say, one of the things that it's helping me with, a lot of people that I say they have a math fear or they don't want to do math, and I love math. I have a writing fear. So putting things out in text format that needs to be in paragraphs and sentences throws me in a tizzy. So I love tools that help me craft what I'm trying to say, because sometimes the words in my brain don't come out the way that I want them to on paper in a way that I feel like is going to be impactful for whoever my audience is. So, I mean, just being able to take that out of the equation and say, here are my bullet points, put this in an email, in a paragraph format, in an email that sounds friendly. Just doing some of that thought, because I do remember as a teacher, I still do it as an instructional coach and professional learning designer, is how do I make words on paper sound professional, sound friendly, sound informative, whatever I need it to sound. So using text like that, it does take a lot of mental load off.
I have the opposite problem of what you just, or maybe it's the same problem, but I don't have a fear of writing as a writing teacher, but I think that everything I have to write a novel. And I do weekly writing tips that I send my students that are like, these are the things that I want you to think about this week. And I'll write 5-6 pages. They're not going to read that. They're not going to read this whole long thing. And I started doing kind of where I would put it in. I use ChatGPT. I'm sure there are better tools for this, but I'll put in what I wrote. So it's my writing tips that I noticed that I want them to work on. It's not anything ChatGPT's provided for me, but I'll be like, listen, ChatGPT, I know my students aren't going to read this whole thing. I know that this is way too long for them. Can you take what I wrote and make it for my students' age that are going to actually be able to benefit from it? And it'll give me like that it'll take, again, it's my ideas, it's my tips, but it'll put it in a way that maybe students will actually be able to skim and use instead of reading my whole other book after they've already been assigned five short stories to read for the week.
Yeah. And that even reminded me just something as we were interviewing teachers for how they're already using these. One of the teachers talked about when students are absent. And I mean, if a student gets the flu, they're out for 3 to 5 days, right? They can't come back to school with, or we don't want them to come back to school with a fever. So yes, stay at home, rest. But then they come back and they're 3 to 5 days behind in all of their classes that they missed, especially if they're in middle school or high school. So how do you help get that kid caught up to the other students without overwhelming them with busy work, right? Exactly the work that happened in the classroom. So he could put in 3 to 5 days worth of PowerPoints or informational stuff that they did and put it in a 3-page sort of summative brief, then give the student something to do to unpack that information and applied information to do a check. Do they have the information? If so, great. We're going to move you on. We're going to give you credit for that. And then within a day, you're caught up to the other students. So you can also use it to really thoughtfully think about providing summary resources, study aids for kids at the end of the unit. Again, just things to help enhance that experience in the classroom fairly quickly than it might take in the past.
And I think sometimes you said emails, but I think getting tone sometimes right is like maybe a parent is asking you about their kid, and sometimes the parents are harder to deal with than the students. I know that's a shock to everybody listening right now. They've never thought of that before.
But yeah. And I mean, as an educator and a parent myself, I have a better, I will say I try to have better grace now for parents than I did probably when I was a teacher before I was a parent or a parent of a student in school. Because yeah, you've just got to remember parents are inundated too with work life and everything, and they are not experts necessarily in education, in pedagogy, in all the things. So yeah, how do you write something that a parent's going to hear or it's going to attract their attention, knowing that everybody in this modern world is distracted by life?
Yeah.
By career and life.
I'm glad you added those details because that is what I was going for. And you said it much more eloquently and briefly than I might have said it. Is that idea of I don't want to accidentally send, like maybe I'm a little frustrated because you're right. The parent is frustrated for their own reasons. And I'm frustrated because I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I'm teaching this here. And I know I don't want to maybe say it in a way that's going to have my frustration.
Yeah, you don't want to escalate an issue. You want to de-escalate the issue and communicate, right? De-escalate, communicate. And I will say I've probably sometimes been that parent that is just trying to advocate for my child, and I may not have the best words to advocate for my child.
So, but using that neutral third party to kind of craft that email to get the point across in a nice, professional way, that's actually going to mean something to the parent and be useful to the parent. I don't know, I'm just using parents there. Students too. I get messages from students sometimes that I'm like, I don't know how to respond to this question that the student asked me. Like when a student asked me on the first day of class, hey, do I have to do the reading this semester? And I want to be like, yeah, obviously. But maybe that's not the best answer there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can use, I was just thinking about, we do it, math is always usually one where it can be parents may not know the strategy that we're trying to teach kids and the why behind the strategy. And they get frustrated of how can I support my student or students, especially when you're in middle and high or upper elementary into high school. They need to be able to do things on their own and practice it, but they might get stuck. So AI can help produce procedural documents or help produce a video or something that kids can have right at their disposal to support them in the moment or as reminders in the classroom. And before, the teacher would have to craft that up from a blank page. So you're like, AI allows us to not start with a blank page.
Right.
All the time.
Rubrics, that's something we talked about in the Spicy A1, along like helping craft. Sometimes rubrics are hard to make.
Rubrics are hard to make.
And you miss important details that, like, when I go to grade, sometimes I'm like, oh, I forgot to put organization on here. Now what do I do? I need them. Whatever. I never forget organization, but whatever, something important. So AI catching stuff like that. All right. So we've talked about this in, I think, maybe both the first 2 episodes, but AI is a partner. It's not a replacement. It's a tool. It's not the builder. When it comes to helping streamline work for this pillar, what does that look like with this pillar?
So, the first thought that went through my head is, it looks like a teacher at the computer. Put him in prompts that help get them that thing that they need to get done. It is using AI for whatever end goal that you need so that you can spend the bulk of your time crafting that learning experience for students.
Right. And I think something important you said there is it's the teacher writing the prompts. That's the human in the moment.
The human in the loop, right?
The human in the loop.
And considering, right? They're like, oh, did that get me what I need? I really needed to say this, or I could take that as a starting point and I'm going to edit it. So it also looks like not taking the first thing the AI gives you and just using that. Making sure that you're layering it with your expertise, your voice, your thoughts. Yeah.
I think maybe a good way to think of it is like a Google search, since most people know how to Google, right? Even if you've never used AI, like hopefully if you Google something, you're probably going to start broad and you're going to get some broad results. And hopefully you're not just clicking on the first Google result and being like, that's it. That's something that you don't want to do, right? You're going to look at things, but you're also going to, as you see the results, you're going to learn more, and then you're going to kind of narrow down. Maybe you're like, oh, this prompt didn't get me there. You see, you do these things because you've been Googling, right, for years and years and years and years now. Same thing with AI, right? Probably going to start a little broad with your prompt, maybe, and then you kind of get some information. Maybe it gives you some ideas, and then maybe you take one of those ideas, and then you're like, oh, I like this idea, but let's see, but I needed to do this and this, and you get narrower, and you don't just take the first results. So thinking of it in that same thing that you're already familiar with of how would you handle this if this was Google, if this was something, and doing the same type of things that you're already familiar with. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. We're going to talk about another big one here. You kind of mentioned it. You said it was in the infancy, and it is one that is both very controversial, I think, and also would be very useful if it worked, especially as somebody who has to grade essays. When it comes to using AI for grading-based tasks, what are your thoughts? What should we think about? What should we be concerned about?
Yeah. I feel like a healthy dose of skepticism always goes a long way with this type of stuff, right? You do have to probably, the first time around, it might take longer because you may want to still read the students' responses and see if AI is giving you what you want, like giving you the feedback, or like just kind of do it all in a sense of test to the feedback that it's giving versus the feedback that you would give, until you get comfortable with the tool. If a student ever comes to you and let's say you are using AI, let's say you've gotten comfortable with using it, you think it's a really good tool 90% of the time that it's working with you, I would also say I don't know. Here's what happened in my brain just now. I would say trust students. Don't automatically say, if students come to you questioning a feedback that an AI system give you, don't automatically think that they are trying to argue with you or argue for a better grade or what have you. That student might be advocating and they may have a point. So do listen to what students are giving you or how students are saying this feels unfair, because it might be. It may not be accurate. And if you haven't, so allow for some sort of flexibility and that two-way communication street between teacher and student. I'm just always cautious, and maybe it's the control freak in me. When I do give something over to the computer, I'm always wanting to make sure, is it giving me what I need to have back before I can wholeheartedly trust it, but always build in some loops in the system that allow for students to self-advocate, for for some checks and balances even yourself, just to make sure it's still giving you what you need, especially with things that in the past have been more descriptive, right? So AI probably is going to be fairly decent at multiple choice, because you don't even really need AI to grade multiple choice tests. You might need AI to grade like some one response or multiple response because of spelling or what have you. Maybe the AI can do that better than a typical algorithm. But when you get into things where you need feedback that's going to be the best next step for that student in their writing or in their mathematical thinking or their mathematical understanding or their scientific explanation, that's where I would really start to just think about, is the AI system giving the feedback that you would give as the expert there? If it is, then you can probably start to trust it a little bit more, but always just be mindful that it is not perfect. Just because it comes from the computer does not mean it's 100% accurate. I don't know if that answers your question.
I guess so. For me, I'll tell you, I am an AI proponent. I tell my students they can use it. I mean, I tell them, I give them guidelines. I don't just say use it, but I use it. I am definitely, and I'm like that in general. I'm a person I'm going to dive into the deep end on this new technology and we're going to figure it out. I'm definitely that person. And at the same time, grading is my least favorite thing to do. Like,
It
I
was mine too.
hate it. Essays, like obviously, and they take forever. And I try to balance in my head. Well, first of all, let me say, despite my love of AI, I have never and don't see myself doing it anytime soon, used it at all for grading. So many reasons. First of all, the data privacy, putting in student work, just like, I know it's already in Turnitin or whatever, but still putting in a bunch of student essays and getting feedback on it feels icky to me. But at the same time, I also wonder, am I missing something? Because sometimes I have 100 essays to grade and a week to grade them. I'm given 5 minutes per essay. I might be able to get better feedback for them if I did try to use grading. Like, not even thinking of it from how it's going to help save me time. How is it going to help them? Because I feel like ChatGPT can read it and in 1 minute give much better feedback than I'm going to give, trying to just quickly do the things so that I can move on to the next essay. So I always wonder about it from that angle. I know this is maybe kind of going into different pillars here because it's not so much, I'm not thinking about how it's helping me.
I know. I would say, I guess this particular one too is like that, go into it with a lot of caution in many steps. And really, I mean, one answer is that it's going to be the more sophisticated tool, and it's going to be the tools that are purchased that allow you to have the power to train the system to provide feedback in the way that you would want to provide feedback, right? And so there are some systems that, and that generally that's not going to be a free service. That's going to be something that's paid, where you could put in, there are systems that I've heard about, I have not used them, where you would ask kids to produce a few writing samples without AI. You feed those into the system, and then the system learns that student's particular writing style, and then they can do some checks or provide feedback, growth oriented. I think those are still in their infancy. The other thing, like if you're able to allow students some use with AI, I would say, so one of the things to help reduce grading of some of those the tasks that require a lot more time to grade is I would always say, do some peer editing processes in your classroom. Don't let the first time students turn something into you be the first time that they revise it or has eyes on it. So do provide time for peer editing, and you're going to have to train kids on how to give feedback and the type of feedback that you want. So it's not a one and done thing, but having the kids do it. Now, if you're able to have an AI system such as Grammarly, right, that can provide just-in-time feedback to improve their writing while they have written something, then that can be a first layer And sometimes the fewer especially for writing, the fewer grammatical mistakes that are there, the less time it takes you to get through it, and you can grade based on the content of the text and not feeling like your hair's on fire because there's 5 run-on sentences and no punctuation, and they're using text speak instead of professional speak in the writing. Some of that can be kind of taken out of the way and can make the grading a little bit more meaningful for the teachers. And then part of this is we want to streamline teacher work so that they can spend more time on the things that need more time. There's going to be a time that you're going to have to grade essays where the students are going to benefit from your expertise, your thoughts, your knowledge of them to give them the next best thing to help grow them as writers, or in my case, as designers, or as whatever it is. So use AI on the task that you don't necessarily need to be spending a lot of time in so that you can spend the time on providing thoughtful feedback on student creative work.
I like that. I think I pulled from 2 things we've said today and through this whole episode. I think I have pulled 2 tips that I want to take away from what you said and what we said earlier. One is a good way to get AI to help with the grading is to help it create a rubric that's going to make grading easier for you, as opposed to having it grade for you. And then 2 is do get rid of some of those other things that we said, the emails that takes you forever, all those things that you do so that you do have more time to grade. So my issue is I only have 5 minutes per essay. I'm not giving them good feedback. Now I have 10 minutes per essay or whatever it is that I need so that I can give better feedback. So I think that's the 2 takeaways that we just kind of covered.
Yeah. And I do think thoughtful feedback to students on their assignments is a way that kids can learn the most from the teacher, and it's where the teacher's providing the expertise. So yeah, use AI to get rid of some of the other stuff that takes up your time so that you can put your time in the things that has more bang for your buck for increasing student learning and growth in student learning.
I wonder if there's also a way I could use AI to just give me tips on how to like grading more.
It's never going to be, I will say this. I used to hate grading, and this is not an AI conversation necessarily, but there are a couple things that help me is moving towards a more standards-based or proficiency-based assessment in my classroom made grading more fun because I was looking for learning as opposed to looking for deficit.
And something you said about the kind of going to the standards, and you said it's more fun because the assignments are, well, that reminds me, that's another way AI can help with grading is if it helps you with the lesson planning process, if you come up with better assignments, they're not only more interesting for the students, but they're more interesting for the reader. Because I know when I have
setting for you.
When it's a paper that's just write this paper make an argument on this story that you read, and then they don't care about the story and they don't care about making the argument, and it's so boring to read. I'm like, if it's boring for the student to write, it's boring for me to read.
Yeah.
But if they have more interesting assignments, they come up with more interesting papers, and then I'm like, oh, this is interesting as I'm reading. Maybe taking the time to write comments everywhere is still not fun, but at least I'm enjoying what I'm reading as I grade. Yeah. I maybe would avoid still having AI grade papers for me, but I think we've come up with some ways. Come up with more interesting assignments so that it's more interesting. AI can help with that. Come up with the rubric. AI can help with that. Get rid of some of those other tasks that you have more time for grading. AI can help with that. So there's lots of ways I think it can help you with the grading process without actually you having to do the ethical debate about, do I get it to grade papers for me or whatever your assignment is. I realize not everybody has papers. So, all right. We already kind of talked about data privacy, but that's such a big issue. I do want to say, outside of just not putting personal information in, do you have any other tips that you've learned as you've written this report on how to protect student data privacy as maybe we're doing these things, writing emails, writing whatever?
No, I think the thing that you said is just avoid putting students' names or any identifying numbers or addresses or anything into the system. And knowing that the system stores all that data and it will learn from that data. So it really is just something to be mindful of. The other thing I think to be mindful of, I don't know if it answers your question, but it was an important part of our conversation in our subcommittee as we were planning these out, especially the opportunities and cautions, is recognizing there's a bias in every system. And we don't necessarily know as we're using it what data an AI system has been trained on, what conditions it makes. So we can't, and I know I did say this, we can't always rely that it's giving us the most accurate information. It's a very powerful tool, but it's not without its blind spots. And so I think it's just keeping that healthy dose of skepticism and caution in the back of your head whenever you're kind of using that and layering it with your own personal, professional expertise.
All right. And so just like students need to learn new tools, part of this is us having students learn to use AI ethically and effectively. That's going to be pillar 4. Teachers that want to use it to either teach it in their class or to use it to make their own life easier need to first know how to use it. What are your thoughts, or what kind of professional development do you think teachers should do to kind of learn the skills to use these tools?
Yeah. So that's a big part of our discussion right now on our subcommittee. And what I've heard from teachers is that are helping to develop teachers with their use in AI is just to get in and just to start using something. Just if you have something that you need it, just try it out. You don't have to use what it gives you, obviously, but you just kind of have to get in and try a lot of different things to see what's going to work for you in your classroom and for your students. I do think that's part of it. One of the things that whenever we're thinking about professional development, period, is within the PD is making time for teachers to use the tool in their context, right? So if I'm a math teacher, I need to use it for my math planning. If I'm a career tech ed teacher, I need to use it for my career tech ed planning, right? So plan for time for teachers to use it while they're in session alongside the experts, the people who are providing the training, and provide time for reflecting and discussing about what that looks like in their classroom, and do that over time. Allow teachers to maybe even this could be an area for a professional learning community in your school. Maybe you have a group of educators who want to learn how to use it, and they're going to form their own little PLC that tries things out, reports back on how it did in their classroom or with their kids, come back, revise it, try something new. I think it's going to take it over time. There's no one and done workshop that is going to satisfy everybody. I will say, from what I'm hearing, is teachers like to start with how they can use it. Start there with how we can use it in our practice for all the professional expectations that we have under us. And then start to think about how might I transition this to students? What might that look like? How might I use this for learning? And then grow from there.
All right. So I want to address something, but I already asked you this exact question in the last episode. So I'm not going to make you answer it again. I just want to kind of remind everybody of what you said last time. So the question I might have asked, if we hadn't already answered it, is, are there tools or apps that you've seen that you would recommend? And so I'm just going to remind everybody that what you said last time was, it depends on what you're allowed to use in your district. It's a good place to start is to see what you already have. Ask people, ask your IT team, your administrator, whoever, what you might already have access to, what you're allowed to use. And then the other big thing is, and this is a good place to remind you that this report that we've been discussing this whole time is freely available online. You don't have to fill anything out. You just get it. It's going to be in the show notes. Along with it is a checklist that Leslie and her team made, and it's really helpful. That helps you ask the questions to decide if a tool is a good tool to use in your school. It also has a list of questions to ask vendors. It's design questions. It's everything. So you can use that to kind of pick the tool that's right for you. Is that anything
Yeah.
you would
And
add?
for your students, your district, your local context. Yeah.
Okay. So then I want to end by asking you the exact same question I asked last time, but for this pillar, because I think that it was a really good question. And I think that's what we're going to end all our episodes on. So what's a small change a teacher could make this week? I know it's summer, so you can think of it the first week of school, whatever, to begin putting this pillar into practice.
Yeah. I would find what's one thing in your area that is more like rote work, administrative type work, that it would be great if you had help doing, and see if there's an AI tool that can support that. I mean, that's just a great place to start. I will say, thinking of tools, and with the caution that use what you're allowed to use. One of the favorites I mentioned before is Diffit, right? So it's hard for me to always find text at the grade level that students are, but has the information that I need them to get. So Diffit allows for an easy access for that, to be able to do that. Maybe it's translating, maybe you have a high ELL population. So maybe you want to try out some translating to parent newsletters or your syllabus as you're creating your syllabus, and then run it by somebody who knows that language. It says, is this correct? Or what feedback would you provide, right? That's probably going to be a lot less time than you having to translate it or do it on your own. So in summary, find an area of work where that it's just kind of driving you mad and you spend a lot of thoughtful time on it, but maybe you could use an AI tool to help make that a little bit less time consuming.
Well, thank you so much for your time for the third week in a row. This has been very helpful, and hopefully everybody else has found it helpful too. Remember, the report, for all the listeners, you already remember, I know. The report is in the show notes. You can also find it on our website. You can also watch this in the video form. If you want to see the video, I'll highlight some of the places in the report where we talk about these things. And we'll see you next week for episode 4, which is going to be on Pillar 3, personalized learning. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.